entitled NTT and Jurisdiction Through Relationship to the Subject Matter. And this is taken from Book 39, Corpus Juris Secundum, Guardian and Ward. Guardian and Ward. Book, 30A. No, that's the wrong book. Guardian and Ward is 39. Book 39, excuse me. I'm starting to see Corpus Juris Secundum as a body of law in the way that it is particularly written, that it has both elements, both public and private, written into it. But according to your social conditioning or your brainwashing, how you interpret what you read, that's how you're going to interpret it. And it comes down to the jurisdiction through the relationship to the subject matter. In that 5/8 show, I talked about the nature of deposits, that there are really two kinds of deposits. There were a general deposit by default, which everything is considered to be a general deposit. And under a general deposit, it gives automatically the rise to the debtor-creditor relationship by default. And then there's special deposit, which is your special circumstances. So the two kinds of deposits being general and special, as I talked about on that 5/8 show. And then we talked about on 5/11 and 5/15 that the equity was really the power of the trust. But I kind of brought out on those shows there that the jurisdiction through the relationship, and the relationship is really that the two kinds of deposits. And I'm starting to see Corpus Juris Secundum as a body of law in relation to the two kinds of deposits, because everything is really generally stated, which means there's a general deposit. And under a general deposit, that gives rise automatically to the debtor-creditor relationship. So I'm starting to see these two realms forming in there very distinctly, public and private, all through the body of law. So this jurisdiction can be gotten through by the relationships to the subject matter. Corpus Juris Secundum, Book 26B. That was the one on depositaries, 2001 edition under Section 6, depositaries. This was special deposit versus general deposit, where it says, quote, a special deposit is one which the identical subject matter deposited, must be kept and redelivered. A general deposit is one in which the identical subject matter, there it is again, subject matter, need not be returned. So there's that direct relationship between general deposit and special deposit according to subject matter, which is really talking about jurisdiction over that subject matter. So subject matter jurisdiction according to the relationship special deposit versus general deposit. Because of the general deposit that gives title to the bank or court, say, and the public realm has subject matter jurisdiction over that title. Where a special deposit pulls the title by a withdrawal from the public and a redepositing it into the private, and the public subject matter jurisdiction ends. Welcome to back office banking in the private. Now, Book 39, Corpus Juris Secundum, talks about guardian and ward. Now, guardian and ward would be one form of, say, general deposit, because there are many different kinds of relationships, say agency, administrator, creditor, other types of relationships under general deposit. But generally, all general deposit is functioning in commerce. That's all we're doing today is commerce. It's all functioning as commerce. So whether it was guardian or ward or whatever, but anyway, 39 Corpus Juris Secundum is guardian and ward. And under Section B, duration and termination of guardianship. And that guardianship would be, say, the supposition that would be the alien property custodian. Section 36, under the general, says terminated by death, resignation, or removal, or any of the other ways. Any of the other ways. And after termination, the guardian only authority is to render an account and turn over the property in his hands to the proper person. I left some things out. Even after his termination of his office, the guardian may reduce to possession truces and actions standing in his own name for the purpose of closing out the trust. Closing out the trust. Now, in there also it talks about where they're treating this as a trust, but it's really not a trust. Kind of double speak if you ask me, but anyway, that's what they say. This Guardian Ward is functioning as a trust, and they're talking about closing out this trust, but really it's not a trust. So I guess if it's not really a trust, they don't have to tell you it's a trust, but yet they're doing everything as a trust. Doesn't that sound like what's going on? So number 39, section 39, now majority of the ward, starting in a little ways, says guardianship terminates when the ward attains his majority. Leaving some things out. Continuing on, the guardian remains subject to the duty if it has not been already performed, comma, of making a final accounting and settlement with his ward. Settlement with his ward. And then you would probably want to jump to page 286 in that same book, section 145, which talks about accounting and settlement, and in general. Now, that's a long section. I didn't get a chance to go through that for tonight, but I would put that on my list to go through and see how that comports to what we're talking about. So we have this body of law that is speeding up the cycle or velocity of commerce. And the banking Federal Reserve book, Money, Credit, and Velocity, always talked about velocity of the money or the speeding up of the cycle. So if they can make laws under civil law that speeds up commerce, then, hey, I think that's what they're doing. They've always been doing that. That seems to be the focus on the law today. So therefore, the law has become our tutor to lead us to Christ so that we may be justified by faith. Now, that was Galatians 3:24 out of the Bible. But today, under civil law, the law is the tutor leading us to the worship of money. The law is used to speed up commerce and worship of money, and everything is commerce today. Where before, the law was supposed to tell you how bad you were of a sinner and leading you to that you needed salvation. It was supposed to lead you to the Savior. But today, the Antichrist is amongst the world, causing you, all you Christians out there, to be worshiping God by obeying the civil laws that are directing you to the worship of money. Seems to me that everything that's public versus private has to do with right, title, and interest. And right, title, and interest being the res, and the res being the land or the chattels. And they would be tangible or intangible res. So it's the res in relation to the public or the res in relation to the private, or the res under the public being really contract in relation to the res. But under the private, it would be res and a trust. Public is at law, and private's in equity. And the whole public society today is set up for commerce. And commerce is our God. But on the private side, we should be using the res in trust under equity for God, not for commerce. And that is going to determine your relationship, which way you're worshiping. Are you worshiping the public, or are you worshiping the private? We've always thought we must exhaust our administrative remedies in the private side and then go into the at-law side to seek our remedy. No. It's following suit that everything we've been doing backwards. We need to seek our remedy at law on the public side first, and then go into the private side in equity after we lose. And we have no adequate remedy at law, and now we can get a remedy under equity under NTT. We're doing it all backwards, everything. And I hope this is getting out to a lot of people and starting to make them think of everything we've been doing in the past, because like fools, we're trying to do the same thing today and tomorrow, what we did yesterday, and expecting the same or expecting different results, which is foolish. It is never going to happen. I don't see any major breakthroughs of anything. And NTT is really too new, being 7 months old, to say, okay, how are you going to compare that to, say, since 1933, everything being commerce and redemption and any other methodology anybody else is using. But I'm not saying NTT is your salvation, but it may be your sanctification on this part of the earth while you're here now. I'm not talking about justification. But it looks like that this Guardian and Ward relationship is kind of what they've had in place and how they're operating. And I'm going through corpus juris secundum and trying to organize the whole corpus juris secundum either into general deposits, functioning in public with different relationships, whether it be agency, executor, or whatever, versus special deposit, which is private, which is under trust. And trust is the only relationship. I don't believe there's any others. So it's trust relationship on the private side under special deposit versus general deposits and all the corpus of body of law that they've implemented, including their 63 million statutes and codes plus that they've got, all for the purpose of disguising and jumbling up like a skein of yarn thrown in a pile of floor on the floor so that you can't find out where the two ends are so you can unravel it. Trying to reduce it down to its simplistic terms, and that's how they're hiding it. Because we're always looking for something much more difficult than what it really is. And it's really the KISS principle, keeping it simple so that we're not stupid. And it is a whole lot simpler. So first we're trying to come up with the model, because that would give us the doctrinal basis in which to start putting the application or the documents together. Because if we're asking for what is the verbiage for those documents, we're not ready to move a step forward, because we can't supply the verbiage because we don't know the verbiage. And we better know where to look to get the verbiage first. And really that's the doctrine. That's the body of knowledge that we need and how this is functioning privately versus publicly. Publicly is everywhere. But to go through all that body of law to separate the wheat from the chaff and come out with the refined gold takes a little bit of time. So I would suggest that everybody go and start focusing in on corpus juris secundum, because that's what's really running this whole show, public and private. You can glean through those and you can find the special, any place where it references circumstances that are special circumstances or exigent circumstances, any place where it's talking not about the general but the special. Pay attention to those because they're telling you something. They're hiding it right before your eyes. And it's very simple. But once we get the model down, I think we should be able to move forward in putting these documents together in a simplistic form, because we don't need a lot of complexity in them in themselves. They're very simple. Now, on the 5/8/2010 show, that was a major revelation there that was added to the list. It really didn't change a whole lot, but it really was changing the focus on what all the stuff that we've been talking about in the past, what it's sitting on. And what it's sitting on, what we were missing was the fact that it was all these general deposits that we put into place already as debtor-creditor contracts all need to be withdrawn. Because that's how you get from a general deposit into a special deposit. You first withdraw it, and then you redeposit it as a special deposit. So we're missing the withdrawal, and then the redeposit, which is really, we've been talking about merger all along anyway. And the fact that we have to do simultaneously both public and private wordage and documents, and do them both simultaneously. So it could be just as simple as a notice, which is really could be containing an order, a notice of termination or merger and settlement with withdrawal or discharge. And withdrawal or discharge, when there's no comma between the two words, one is the same as the other. But discharge is a public term, where withdrawal is a private term. And we were talking about merger, and then under this Guardian, settlement. So it's merger and settlement, which are one and the same. But it's notice of termination after merger, or termination is merger. And we get this settlement with the withdrawal or the discharge. And again, under Section 36, termination by death, resignation, or removal by any of the other ways. And after termination, the guardian's only authority is to render an account and turn over the property in his hands to the proper person. Even after termination of his office, the guardian may reduce to possession, chooses an action standing in his own name for the purpose of closing out the trust. Closing out the trust. That's what we want. We want to terminate, we want to close out the trust and terminate it. So after this majority of the ward, which was at 21, say, and we didn't take over the controls of the helm of this trust, the guardian still remained in place, and that guardian could have been the alien property custodian. So he still remained in place, or his assigns, and is still in place because the ward, which is us, is still incompetent. And until we get our competency, the guardian remains subject to the duty, quote unquote, and continuing on, if it has not been already performed, of making a final accounting and settlement with his ward. So when we come into the knowledge that we have to ask for a final accounting, that they give us a settlement, and they sever the loops, the connections between us. And now we're competent to handle our own affairs without a guardian, through a notice of termination or merger and settlement with withdrawal or discharge. And all we're doing is we're merging titles, we're doing a withdrawal, we're doing a discharge, and we're doing a redeposit. That'll terminate the account. And then we'll go back and we'll ask for the remainder to be put into a new trust that has no connections with anybody from that point on until we connect them. And if we get into our own affairs and mess it all up, we got nobody to blame but ourselves from that point on. Because the old straw man, the old trust account does not exist. The slate has been wiped clean. And now you got to restart as a new person, so to speak, functioning in public. So with that, I think we'll open it up for some questions and answers. So press *6, state your name and where you're from.
Yes, good evening, Chris. Bill from New Jersey. How are you?
Good. How about you?
Good, good. You know, it was interesting you said that we have to go to at law to lose before we go to equity. I was reading that this weekend about the chancery laws in New Jersey. That's how it works.
Yeah. I don't know why we didn't see that before.
Well, I don't know, but I just started researching it, and it was right there.
Yeah, that's the thing. We're not doing the research. We're relying on the gurus that have been doing the research, and they've done a wonderful job so far because that's the people I've learned from. But then we must all pick up the duty to do our own research and start contributing back. And if we would do the duty and start doing our own research and start contributing back into it all as one unit, we've probably been a whole lot farther ahead. We probably would have this before.
How would that work? We go, or do we sue, or we sue, then we go to equity? How do you see that working?
Yeah, I think you come at colorably as much as you can to litigate and to try and win. But if you can't win, you can't get your remedy. Don't give up. But that's what everybody does from that point on. They take your house, they take your card, they take your bank account. But then that stops there. You give up. You walk away. You're defeated. Here, you didn't have an adequate remedy at law any longer, but now you had the real remedy. You could go into a court of equity and present under trust.
And as a matter of fact, in what I read, you know, mortgages are a part of the scope of which the Chancery Court handles. That's one of the things that they do.
Yeah, mortgage is an equitable action in the court.
Now, in the past, we've been talking about keeping the private, you know, our res and stuff like that. Now, is that still the case? We're not going to expose that in the public, but we'll wait till we get into equity?
Yes, I would remain the same thing because you're going to waive your equitable rights by making a public notice.
So then, basically, we want to win at law, but if we don't, then we're going to go into equity, which is really where we want to go in the first place.
True, right. But then you must exhaust your administrative at-law side first, not your administrative remedy private side first. We have it backwards.
Right. You can't get there unless you exhaust your public.
Right. You got to exhaust your public remedies first, and if you can't get it there, you can't get a remedy there, then you can go into equity on the private side. Now there is no adequate remedy at law, and your remedy is going to be in equity.
Now, what percentage of people do you think actually take advantage of equity?
None. Because what they're going under is the public disguise of the public equity that they've renamed to be statutes and codes, which is not true equity, which is in chambers.
Let's talk about that, because what I was reading, that they're talking about the statutory equity. Now, is that part of the public, or how is that influencing the private equity?
Well, private equity has nothing to do with statutes and codes. There's no quoting of any statutes and codes in the equitable side in chambers. It's all about maxims and law.
Okay. Now, also, I was reading that apparently the in-camera proceedings can be done on phone.
True. Yeah.
So it's.
Hey, Christian. Christian.
Yeah. Why don't you let him finish?
Oh, I was just going to add something to it.
He was kind of.
Go ahead. Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to confirm that if you have an open case, the court will act as trustee. I've got confirmation of that because I just got a letter back from the Superior Court saying with the 1991 and 28 with trust res, the only reasons why they did not accept the settlement and the closure of that particular case is because the judgment had already passed, and it was so judgment was passed on the case and it was closed. Therefore, they were no longer acting as trustee.
And what was the case? Mortgage foreclosure?
Well, that was actually a case on a credit issue of $131,000, and we submitted we submitted a 1991 and a 28 along with the trust information that we've been working on, and it looks to me that they would have accepted it if the case was still open. That was the point I was trying to make.
Oh.
Yeah, they actually sent us
the case
saying that the only reason why is because judgments have already been passed.
What was the judgment?
All was in favor to the attorney, and therefore I'm actually redrafting the attorney, giving him one more opportunity to go ahead and accept the trust res and merge the titles. And I like the wording you were using tonight with Guardian Ward, the termination of Guardian. I like that wording because that is some of the missing pieces to my first paragraph of my opening statement to the attorneys.
Why don't you go in and reopen the case?
We will if we have to, but I would rather give them a second chance to go ahead and merge the titles and settle this without going back into the court. If we do, we've got 3 other paragraphs that include the facts and the reasons why we can go open that case again.
And then you can add damages because you're going back into the court again.
Yeah, that's the intent. In other words, if we have to go back to court, if you can't behave yourself as the guardian and as the custodian trustee, therefore, if you fail us one more time, we'll just take it back to court, reopen it, and then we'll have this met in chambers.
Right, but when you have to, don't you have to file specifically into the court of equity, not into the court of law?
Well, the defendant, I think, has the ability to go back and respond to anything that's fraudulent, of which is part of the other paragraphs that we've got typed out here. They're charging the wrong person. It's obvious that they're doing so. There is no contractual agreement with one of the parties, but they're being forced to have to answer to this and have their credit being damaged because of that. So therefore, that's how we're going about saying if they have to go open this again, it will be based off of fraud.
Right, but my question deals with, that's I guess something to look at. But I'm saying there are 2 things. We're talking about statutory, public, and we're talking about equity in the private. So now, if you go back into court, that's public. You create an action or initiate an action on the public side, right?
Well, with what Christian's talking about, the 9091 and 28, which would be trust res out of the UCC 1 and being transferred by a 3, it's still on the private. How we would reopen the case is by a notification of fraud that had occurred during that case while it was still open.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just not. Maybe I'm not clear on what you're saying. But I don't understand how you're going to go from the public to the private. We were talking about not being successful in the public and then seeking remedy in equity after having, not been successful. That you're going to go back and open again in the public, which is not in equity. That's what I'm not clear on.
Well, then he'll take it back into the private. He has to open it up in the public. Then he takes it in the private and instructs the judge what's going on.
But he has to lose in the public.
We already have.
It's colorable, remember?
Okay, I got you. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
No, that's exactly the way it would happen. Once you reopen the case, then that allows the judge to be trustee and have to handle the matter. Therefore, that's when you would do in camera. You go back into chambers and show the judge that based off of Bankruptcy Act 1933, that we gave them an authorized, known remedy to go ahead and settle and close and merge out the case, of which they failed to do so. Therefore, they're guilty of defrauding the United States of America, and the intent of Congress is to use up these remedies in lieu of debts. And
gotcha.
That's not going to look very pretty if they have to go that far in chambers with a judge.
Right, I got that point. I didn't understand. I got you now. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, remember the deposit was the cloak for another transaction, a payment or a surety, and that in equity was going to look through the form on the private side into the substance and reveal its real nature.
Very well put, C.W.
Well, that was a quote out of Corpus Juris Secundum, but I forget where it was. It was there. It's in there all along. So that's
You read it last week.
Yeah, I won't take credit for coming up with that, but I'll take credit for revealing that.
Well, you know what I mean, because the thing is, what Chris is doing is exactly what you spoke about a week ago, and then you just reiterated it just now. He's doing everything. Everything is what we've just been taught within the last 2 weeks.
And we won one case last week with this information, CW.
All right. Tell me a little more.
Yeah, well, a traffic ticket, $800 traffic ticket for something innocent like turning on a right turn or something like that. Well, the guy was frantic, and he called me up and says, well, can you type me something out? He gave me 15 minutes before I had to show up in court. And because the judge had entertained putting a plea in for him at the arraignment, and the meeting that he had with the judge that morning was a trial. And so what I did is I had placed in the contents that the judge had obligated himself as trustee and was basically in a contractual agreement, because he had entered a plea for him, is to act on his behalf as an attorney. And then I went ahead and put the information of settlement and closure of the case, and it was a sweet half a page worth of information, 15 minutes worth of work, and I saved the guy $800 just by using a couple of the words that we've been, toiling around with.
Right, good.
And he was elated. This guy could not believe that judge, this is the meanest judge in the county. I mean, he has violated so many people's rights in front of me. And he says, this guy was Mr. Such and Such. Can you please step forward? So he steps forward and he says, your case has been dismissed. Just like that. And he could not believe that judge treated him so kindly like that. So anyway, we're having wins, at least I am. And, I really thank you for teaching us this. It really straightened out exactly what it is that we're dealing with here. It's just like it just straightened everything out in my mind.
Yeah, it really does. It does. It connects all the dots and brings it all together, because it is the foundation that everything's really resting on.
We knew a long time ago, CW. This is Floyd. we knew a long time ago that you had to get your remedy in equity, and we never knew how to get into equity. That was...
Yeah, but we were doing it backwards. We were trying to get into doing the private side equity first, and then coming in and telling the public side of the court that we'd won. No, we had to go into the public side of the court and lose, and then come into the private side under equity and win.
Well, we knew that we had to. We knew that we had to administratively exhaust all of our remedy, and we knew that, but we didn't know what to do after we did that. How to get them to make them do what they were supposed to do. That was always the roadblock. See, so if we would have understood trust at that time, we'd have had a lot more success.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I guess there is no fine wine until it's time.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, there was a lot of people that I knew that was working on well, there was several people that were trying to work on keeping me out of prison, but I had no idea what we were doing. I knew nothing about UCC. I mean, that was all mystery to me. So I was depending on these other people that were supposed to know something, and most of them came out of common law and Constitution, and that's all they understood. So
yeah, that's kind of the basis of the title of the show tonight: NTT and jurisdiction through relationship to the subject matter. So the subject matter is, it doesn't make any difference on the at-law side whether I win or lose, because if I lose that relationship, I don't have to worry about it, because it's the special deposit that I put in that determines the relationship, and then equity can get a remedy.
Right. That was the key that we didn't understand or didn't have was the special deposit. So
the general deposit versus special deposit, or the trust deposit, that actually sets the jurisdiction. Jurisdiction over.
Yeah, jurisdiction has always been a real stickler with everybody, and I know that Shane talked about how to stay out of jurisdiction, and he did it through creditor debtor. But when you understand it through trust, now you have control of it, and you're not having to be aware of all the sneaky tricks that they're and curveballs that they're throwing at you, because now you're the one that's doing the pitching instead of having to be standing up there trying to hit the ball.
Yeah, right. That's well put.
CW. Yeah, this is Michael. Then what you're saying is basically where we're going to get our remedy in some of these situations is lose in court and then turn around and say that there was a fraud put on the court and then reopen it and then give the information in camera. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what it looks like to me. It doesn't make any difference whether I win. If I get a win, well, then I might not have to go into the remedy because I already got a remedy. But if I don't get a remedy, I lose. Don't give up, because now you need to go into equity, and there's where you will win.
Okay, so we could win no matter what. They might give us the opportunity to go into camera at the beginning. If not, then we can come back and re-express it and reopen it and get them on the second run. Yeah,
we got to exhaust our at-law side remedy, and when we lose, then we can. Now there is no adequate remedy at law because we lost, and now we can go into equity where there is a remedy. So it's almost like we've got to lose first at the at-law side, which opens the door for the remedy in equity.
How do you define exhausting your administrative remedies?
Well, you do everything.
We all think we have to exhaust our administrative remedy on the private side first. Well, you may complete your administrative remedy, get it ready for when you need to go into equity. But then go ahead and play the public side court at-law side. And if you lose, don't worry, because that just opened the door for you to go into equity. Because when you lose, now there is no possible way that you can get a remedy because you lost. Now that's why they say there is no adequate remedy at law.
Okay. Now, when you're in equity, isn't that in camera?
Well, remember, there's two kinds of equity. There's that public side statutes and codes equity, which is not real equity.
Mm-hmm.
In-camera equity is different from that one.
Well, okay, that's okay. So now we lose on the public side. We file in the statutory equity side, and we still have to maintain the difference between the public and the private, and still go into in camera to reveal our personal private property.
Yeah, as long as I think as there's an adequate remedy at law, then you can't get into equity because you got a remedy that you could get. But
no,
now, if it's closed that you can't get a remedy at law, now the door opens up for you in equity that you can.
Right. So if that's true, my question is equity in camera?
Yes, the true equity is in camera.
Right, but when we go to the court, is that true equity or is that the culpable equity?
Well, you can have an in-camera hearing as long as regular court is not in session. That would be in camera.
Right, and
that
would
be in the hallway, or it could be even on the golf course.
Could be on the telephone.
Yes, on the telephone. Anywhere that it is not actual court going on, that would be in chambers.
Okay. Now, everything we say in there is protected.
Well, it should be because it's private. Make sure that you keep it private. That way it would be protected.
Right. Now, at that point, can the administrator or the judge make a decision, a determination, or we have to go back into the culpable side?
Yeah, that's where your maxims come into play, and that's where the equity is going to look through the form, process, and procedure of the public side, the at-law side. It's going to look through into equity and see equity for what it really is, the real nature. Remember I said that the nature of equity, let me see where that's at. The law of nature. Equity was once known as the law of nature. The law of nature and equity, the law of God.
Now, in the ninth edition of Black's, there are a couple of definitions for equity, or commentaries, rather. And one is from a gentleman, and I think it's 1982 or 1986. He says, forget about that nature stuff. It doesn't exist anymore.
Forget about what?
Forget about that nature stuff.
That nature stuff. Yeah, right. It's held in secret in camera.
Forget about that.
Chris, if you're still online, can you send me what you wrote? Because I could use that in my situation that you're aware of. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, who's speaking?
Michael.
Oh, Michael. Okay.
All right. Thanks.
What's your email, Michael?
Or
are you online?
I'm online.
You're on Skype?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just send it Skype-wise.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt the group.
Another question? Anybody?
Christian, it's Steve in Minnesota.
Hey, go ahead, Steve. How are you?
Good. We got a small group up here. We've been listening to you for ever since last fall, and I've been listening, catching up, playing a lot of catch up on your audios. Back in January, February, and in some of the March broadcasts, you were talking about that workshop. Did that ever happen, or is there still a possibility of that happening? Or
yeah, that's still on the back burner, but yeah, there's a possibility it could happen.
Okay, because I just feel, I'm so uncertain. I just kind of mechanics of some of the forms and so forth. Like, I'm getting the gist of the general idea behind the trust and what it takes to express it and prove it and stuff. But just,
unmuted.
Doing the different steps up through, claiming the IMF file and so forth is kind of is hard to just. I'm used to checklists and to go through a workshop like that and kind of try to jot it down and
why the
put it in.
workshop was shelved was really because there weren't enough people with basic understanding to really start putting documents together.
Yeah,
Or information out there that people could rely on and do some further studies to develop that foundation first before. Because moving titles platform was difficult for people to understand. You really got to grasp that before you get in here and start talking about merging titles with trust under NTT. That just, it wouldn't fit. I thought we were 3 steps ahead, but no, we weren't. So we had to go back to like step 1.
Okay, yeah, because the moving titles part of it really, you get your arms wrapped around that. I can see how important that is.
If we can't create records, then we can't move titles. If we can't create the titles, create the records, we can't move them. So, and then we have to understand how to move them.
Well, we're going to keep pressing on here and keep listening to you, and thank you so much for what you're doing. It's really it's a good thing, Christian.
Okay,
Christian, I have a question for you.
Go ahead, Terry.
We know that whenever we make a general deposit with an application or a mortgage note, that they can securitize that.
Right.
But when we withdraw it from the account and redeposit it as a special deposit, can the bank securitize that special deposit?
Not unless I give them authority, because it's supposed to remain intact.
That's a private special deposit. It's supposed to be able to get it back out just like we put it in.
Right.
And they can't commingle it or anything like that unless we give them authorization.
Yeah, the specific purpose. So we would make a special deposit for a specific purpose.
Great. That would open up some doors for us to get them to cooperate, it seems.
Well, I think the real cooperation is going to come when we do the enforcement, and the enforcement is really us. And it's through equity, and equity really is us.
Yeah, I'm thinking more of presenting offers to them or orders to them that are really options that they get to choose the lesser of all evils, if you will, for lack of a better phrase, as far as they're concerned in their banking issues.
Mm-hmm.
So if we give them orders that they can use that special deposit, securitize it, keep it, and securitize it, but return everything else that they've taken from us, then that might be a choice they'd be willing to take rather than risk going to equity court and having to give up everything.
Right.
Plus damages. Okay, great. That answers that question. Thank you.
But wouldn't that be going into the public again?
Well, that's the whole trick, not to go into the public and commingle it back again. How to keep it private.
So securitization.
Make it colorable enough that it's seeable on the public side. Simultaneously, you got to be in control of both sides, public and private. And that's a new skill level we have to learn how to accomplish.
Right.
How would you do that in this scenario?
Go through it a little more. What was it again?
Where we had a special deposit of like an application or a mortgage note that we withdrawing and redepositing. And they given them the option to securitize that and, keep it and securitize it. In conjunction with returning all the payments we've ever made and everything they've ever securitized and earned interest off of in the past, as well as giving us title to properties and whatnot. If we can dangle that carrot where they can keep that special deposit in circulation as a security, that might be very attractive for them to settle before having to go into equity court and lose the whole ball of wax.
Right.
Look on the site. Look on the site, CW, with the document that we just did, and it goes into more detail.
I was going to get on there before tomorrow night.
But how would you direct them in such a way with that special deposit that it does keep it in the private, so that they're not commingling, or do we even care if they commingle at that point? As long as we got everything else we wanted. And that really goes into if they don't have the original note, but yet we're asking them for a note back, knowing that all they're going to offer us is a copy. But if we colorably tell them, well, you can keep that note, not pointing out that we know it's not the original, you can keep it or withdraw it and then redeposit it as a special deposit and keep it in circulation.
Yeah, you're kind of answering your own question, really.
Yeah, so we really don't care what they do with it after we give it back to them. We're not probably going to direct them to securitize it, but we're going to allow them to keep it and let them do what they will, which we know what they're going to do.
Yeah, I could give them the order to simultaneously withdraw it, but then redeposit it.
Right.
So they just say, supposedly they should transfer it from one account, where the security is, into the private account to where it should be now. Now,
right.
If they do that or not, okay, that may be up to them.
Yeah, like I said, as long as they return to us what our order directs them to, and we're willing to let them keep the trust res and securitizing it if they want. I mean, they'd be foolish not to if they have that ability, even if it is fraud or unlawful.
Right.
It'd be the same scenario they're operating under now.
Mm-hmm.
Only difference being we got our orders fulfilled.
Hey, Christian, don't you think if he really wanted to lock them in on something like this, he would do a notice of 18 USC at 1832, which is the trade secret code?
I'm kind of shying away from trade secret and confidential commercial information and sticking more with confidential.
I see. Okay. So is there any thinking behind that made your decision, or is it just because of what?
Well, because trade secret and CCI is really in the statutes and codes. Now, if I wanted to, do a statutory trust with that, then I could probably use that. But if I wanted to do a private trust, I would probably just use confidential. It would be private confidential information.
And that would more lean towards like an unstatutory, like an expression of the trust, right?
Statutory stuff.
Yeah,
because that's public.
So now, going back to the issue about how you're going to make it, keep it private but take it in the public, could that be similar to what the old goldsmiths did? They took the gold, they held it, the original bankers, they held it, but they used it to make more money, to fractionalize. Even though the gold was held in trust.
They overlend it, yeah.
Yeah,
they turned it over more times than they really were allowed, or whether they could. But nobody said anything, so that made it okay, I guess.
Right, but I'm just saying, is that a similar principle as what we're talking about here, where we say, look, special deposit, gold is special deposit, but I give you authority to use it to generate, additional flow?
Yeah, that's kind of like what we're talking about. We're holding it still in private, but they get the use of it, but they pay me a fee for the use.
Exactly. That would be the interest on the res held. Now, next question is, how do the old trust companies do that? I mean, you are Morgan Stanley Trust. I bang to you some bonds. I say, okay, here you are, Morgan Stanley or Mr. Morgan. You got my bonds. I want you to keep them in special deposit. But now, you got to make some money too. How does the trust make money? Do they invest? Do they make money off of the bonds? Do they have to pay me a percent, or do they charge me a percent? How does that work?
What are the bonds? Are they public bonds or are they private bonds?
A good question. I don't know. It's okay. Let's say they're bonds for the some railroad line way back in the turn of the century.
Oh, that's using off those gold subrogation questions that were used back when they switched from the gold standard. I don't know. I have to think about that. Comes down to what's trust res. Is it really statutory or is it private?
Well, but I mean, if they're my bonds, does it matter if the bonds are public bonds? I'm making them private.
I can make them private by withdrawing them and putting them in a special deposit, but then now what do you do with them? They have to remain in special deposit, but then they can be
muted,
done trades against, which would generate the interest.
Exactly. That's what we're saying.
Right.
So the question I'm asking, how do we look at the trust, the old trust? How did they do it? Maybe there's an answer there.
Well, if it was private, there's a whole world in private banking that is like the 9/10 of the iceberg underwater that nobody sees.
Right.
And the number one rule out there is there are no rules.
Right. Exactly.
Everything is private, and whatever private people can do amongst themselves, they can do. And there are no restrictions on fractionalization.
So then I think it was Paul who called about the question, making that with the mortgage note. So then if that's the case, then he's on the right track. You would take it, claim it from the public, put it back in the private, but to give them the authority to generate income on top of that.
Yes, right. But it would all have to be done privately.
Okay, private would mean that, say, Morgan Stanley Trust Company has a special private, because it's trust means private right away. It stays in the,
that's what back office banking is, all private.
Right. Now, how would they transfer?
How does it work? Well, nobody knows because it's private.
Okay.
That's probably the second rule. Everything is private, and anything goes.
Right.
So you just have to have privity of knowledge. Another question? Anybody else? Question?
Christian?
Yeah.
Is Gilbert's is that statutes and codes or is that private?
Statutes and codes. It's the Black Trust, Gilbert's.
So you can't bring that in when you're in camera. Say like the judge asks you if you have any case law to back what you're saying or something. If you bring something up, any case law, then that you're bringing the public into the private, right?
Under case law, probably so.
So you wouldn't be able to bring in Gilbert's as well then?
Gilbert's would be just purely statutory.
Which is public.
It's public trust material, yeah.
Okay.
So then all equity case law is public.
All statutory case law is public.
Okay, but if we go to equity, we have a case. Will there be a record of that if it's private?
All right, which side of equity are you trying to get into?
We're in the private side.
Private side, okay. Maxims take place. Specific performance.
Okay, is there a record that indicates what transpired?
A record that indicates what transpired. Well, as to what regards? That to the trust was formed?
No, to the outcome of our endeavor. We're going to go there. We're going to seek relief on the private side, and if we say that the case law is public, statutory, then if we go into in camera, are there any records that are there any records for the proceeding that takes place?
Yes, to claim trust, prove trust. Now, once you've claimed and proved trust, now the beneficiary steps forward with a claim, and that claim is believable because the court of equity is going to, the onus of probandi is going to shift to that trustee that he's made a breach, or somebody's made a breach.
But how's that documented?
By those records.
Oh, I see. Okay. And those records are always kept private.
Yeah, in other words, we got a private agreement or a trust between the private parties.
I got you.
Okay. That fellow had a duty to do some kind of performance, and he fell down and didn't perform. Now, court of equity is going to look at him as guilty, and when is he going to perform?
So then basically there are no private equity case laws.
No case law under equity, not in chambers. No, it's all equitable maxims.
Okay. Thanks.
It's just the presumption that's set forward by the beneficiary, or it could be the trustee could bring for a claim jumper on the trust or something. Trustee should defend the trust. He should make a claim against the claim jumper that he's trying to breach the trust. Now, the court of equity is going to assume that this guy is breaching the trust, and it's going to enjoin him not to.
Yeah, I noticed that they have injunction. Injunction is one of the remedies at trust. I mean, equity, right?
Yes, injunction could prevent you from doing the breach of the trust, or compel you to do the duty of the trust.
Oh, how would that work for us?
Either way, whichever way it is. I don't know the particular scenario, but it works both ways.
Well, let's say we want to compel the trustee to perform. We're in equity, and then we petition the court for an injunction to perform. Is that what happens?
Yes, right. Motion to compel him to do the duty.
Oh.
Because it was a duty relationship between private parties and equity. And the beneficiary or the trust had the duty, or they had the obligation that was owed to them. It's all about duties and rights and interests in equity, which has relation to titles.
You forgot obligations, too.
Is what, Chris?
Obligations, duties and obligations.
Yes, right. Uh-huh.
Now, injunctive release, can that be sought on the public as well, public side?
Yes. There's statutory injunctive relief, yes, under statutory equity, yeah.
Okay, so would that be one of the ways we could go in colorably to go to equity?
Yes. Uh-huh. like I say, the key is probably learning how to juggle both sides of the balls in the air and get them, simultaneous with both sides.
Right. That was my next
You
question.
got to juggle the actual real balls, and then you got to get your puppet over there in the public side to start juggling your balls over there too.
Okay. Well, are you the puppet master?
Yeah, that's what you become. Another question, anybody?
Yeah. Hi, Christian.
Hey, Pete. How are you doing?
Confused as usual. But thanks for asking.
Hey, PD, how you doing?
Hey, Matt, is this Erich?
Just saying hello, PD. Go ahead and ask your question to CW. I didn't want to take away your time.
Yeah, what it is, you often, you have to, on occasion, mentioned confession of judgment. And I'm just wondering how this fits in with this.
I forget how I used it before, confession of judgment.
You've sort of mentioned that it would be on the private side for, I'm sure you said it would be a title of the document at one time early on. And then I think you were going through corpus juris secundum a couple of weeks ago, and you sort of brought it back up again.
Yeah, I kind of remember vaguely going over it, but I don't remember exactly what it said.
Okay, so in coming in at equity, then we have to go in the public side anyway, do we? Is that what I'm... Because I would imagine that we would have to, because it's a publicly ran court.
Yeah, we need that public witness to get them to recognize what we've done in the private, yeah.
Okay, now, if we're submitting an affidavit, or, well, let's say if we're submitting an affidavit, in the public side, do we submit the same one in the private, or have we waived the right to that affidavit and we have to draft up another, which is a special
an affidavit
affidavit?
in the public just points to an actual competent fact witness that is going to submit testimony in open court. So when you're in chambers, you might not have to say, here's my affidavit. You are the affidavit speaking in.
Yeah, I see, yeah.
Christian?
Yeah. Speech done.
I'm sorry, Pete. Are you finished, Pete?
Yeah, go right ahead, yeah.
Okay. Nice hearing your voice. Now, when we're in equity, private side, I was reading that the corporations come in there as well. But they're corporate victims. How does that work?
Yeah, are you reading that from Lewin?
No, what I was reading today about here in New Jersey was a handbook, a guidebook. Or there's a treatises, and I was just reading that. It was a case I was reading. And
I don't think that a corporation can be seen in the equity in chambers. I don't think a corporation can be seen there at all.
But it was in Chancery Court. It was about a bank, PNC Bank. They were defrauded $23 million.
Okay, what year was that case?
I don't remember. It was in the 90s. Maybe, no, it was 2000 or something. 2000.
Okay. So how was it? They said what now?
Oh, they were saying, I didn't finish the whole thing, but what happened, this person defrauded the bank of $23 million. And apparently they had lost at law and they were seeking remedy in equity. You know, it's a corporation, a bank.
Uh-huh.
There was another one about...
Probably looking at the, say, the CEO or something and bringing the claim in.
Well, it didn't mention any personal name. It just mentioned the bank.
Mm-hmm.
I think I covered this a couple of weeks ago, and Christian tended to agree, was that the information on a bank is that a bank is at common law, and the business of banking is statutory. So the bank can come in at common law, which was then, in equity.
How does that work?
Well, that's what Lewin was saying also in a practical treatise on law and trust. That now in more modern times, after the trust got separated, that even corporations functions as persons.
Okay, but that would make it statutory, wouldn't it?
I don't know. It depends on how equity's looking at it. Equity's probably going to look at it to enforce a contract.
Right. Okay. So then, what I'm getting is that in equity, it's the person that we're looking at, and that's the real live human being, that real live person. All those guys can be in there.
Yeah, because a fiction has to be represented by a real live person, just like they're dragging you in there.
Right.
It's got to be represented on behalf of by somebody else, a real person.
All right. They probably was. I didn't probably see that, but I see your point. Because that's the res, and the personam is the person in charge of the res, right?
Yeah, they need somebody that they can see that's pulling the strings.
Right.
What if we looked at a bank? Do we know what makes up a bank? Obviously, a bank has a treasury operation, and then it has a private side, and then it's got its commercial side, if at all. So the treasury operation is the private inequity side, and then the sort of middle banking is is then moving into statute, and the commercial side is full on commerce. Would a bank need to be set up in a particular way, to fit into all them three things? Like, I don't know what the regulations are on being a bank.
But the banks are governed by...
They're going to have to be public, statutorily set up.
Right.
But then they wouldn't be able to do any back office banking, which they obviously do.
Well, they'd probably set up some fiction entity to be the disguise or the cloak of some other kind of deposit.
They must do that, yeah, because LCH won the award for back office bank, and they're a commercial entity, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm saying. Are we missing how a bank needs to be set up if it wants to do business in?
Well, I think the statutory bank is set up to hide the fact that they're doing private banking. Now, we don't need to set up a public bank. We are private banks.
Mm-hmm.
We really don't need them. If we start doing business privately amongst ourselves, cut out the public realm. Don't need it. But that's how we're functioning, through the public, under a general deposit. And we're all doing commerce. We don't need to do commerce. Don't need the public. Just start functioning privately.
What would be our benefit from that? If you and I contract privately?
Yes, we all contract privately, yes.
Now, is there any, I mean, I hear what you're saying, I understand that, but what is the material benefit?
The material benefit is that we don't use money because money is the vehicle that they're using to control us.
You mean digits? Because we're not using money, right?
Money we don't have in their realm, which is Federal Reserve notes.
Right, the notes. Okay, so then if that's the case, what will we use? What could
Whatever we want.
I got you, right, okay. We can use tallies.
The money should be the product that we are giving away.
Okay, I got you. But that would be like bartering, wouldn't it?
We are giving it away to anybody who needs it.
Mm-hmm.
And all we need to do is keep an account of our giving, because the more giving that you give, the more richer you are.
Well, that then brings us to a place where we need to go on the offence against commerce then, to push it back
In what
from
way?
its... Well,
in what way?
It's always trying to encroach on private people, isn't it? It's always trying to drag them into their jurisdiction. But we need to reverse that equation and start pushing them back so that they get squeezed.
How do I become proactive in that?
Is that a trick question?
Yeah, that's my question. How to become proactive in that?
Using private transactions?
Yep, and don't use their public money.
So you're talking about the gray market?
Talking about what?
The gray market, where people exchange goods and services, barter?
No, I'm not talking about exchanges. No, we don't need to do exchanges.
You're drawing on the conscience, aren't you?
You need a car? I'll give you a car. We'll give them a car. You need bread today? Give them bread for today. But we need some kind of accounting system to say, okay, keep track of it, because really it comes down to Philippians 4. It says, Paul in Philippians 4 talks about, it's to your account that you give. So we need an accounting system that keeps track of your giving. And that's what we're using as money. You're giving. Giving unconditionally, without something in return.
It was given to you freely, you give back freely.
Right. That's the kind of monetary system we need, instead of this take stuff. Everything's based in commerce on taking. You take and you have and you hold. No. God's kingdom says you're supposed to be giving. And you need to be working at giving. Because if a man doesn't give, he doesn't eat. This is the kind of economy we need. This is the kind of
unmuted
monetary system based on giving, not on taking.
But Christian, aren't we to teach them how to fish rather than just give them a fish as well?
Yeah, right, because that's whatever my cup runs over with, that's what I should be giving.
Yeah, because we don't want them to be holding to us rather than standing on their own 2 feet and being responsible.
Right. Looks like it's,
so I think we have to be careful with that.
Then there won't be anybody working at the Pollo Tropical or the chicken place, and they won't be serving any chickens. Well, everybody needs to be working at giving, so if I go to work at the chicken place and give chickens away, then that's my work. So when I need a chicken, I go to the chicken place and get a chicken for free. And then I go to work at Pollo Tropical, and I work there, and I give away meals there, or whatever. So if everybody's working at giving something, the assembly line for the automobiles, everybody should be working there with their time so they can give an automobile. And then they can go to the chicken place and get a chicken for that day.
And they use the labor of giving that they provided to pay, use quote unquote, for what they need.
Right, right.
I can see the great benefit in this, but it's going to take a tremendous paradigm shift.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm not going to be able to do
it.
It's going to have to be Christ that's going to set that up, not me. There's
Exactly.
has to be, like you said, a paradigm shift in attitude. He's the one that's going to implement it, not me.
Yeah, but that's what we're beginning to set up in this effort.
Yes, right. The awareness is growing, yes, that there has to be something different than other than what we've got already, because it's not working.
Well, that paradigm shift is about ready to occur within the near future, whether it occurs 6 months from now, this summer, or 5 years from now. It's getting ready because they're taking the wealth from everyone.
Well,
Doesn't
that's
matter,
fine.
you know. But in the mindset, this is what I'm saying, is I agree with you in that regard, that it needs to start somewhere.
Yeah.
I like the way Gene Keaton terms it in that they're stealing your equity.
Yeah.
So now they've been found out and we're coming after them.
Yes, and they're going to have to find something else to do. They're going to have to find out ways to give rather than just take.
And they can't in the commercial system because there's no scope for it.
Right.
They're going to be giving. They're going to be giving a pollo loco.
So now, how does that tie into? We're talking about Guardian and Ward.
We are our brother's keepers.
Yeah, you're right. So then,
our job is to teach them what we are learning now.
Right. So the ward then really is like waiting until the Guardian is waiting for the ward to wake up, as Christian said earlier, to go into this new mindset so that we can have a different type of economy and lifestyle.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Now, the Guardian Ward, would that still be like trustee beneficiary?
Well, they look similar, but they're missing some kind of an element that makes it a trust.
Oh, really? So when you use Guardian and Ward, what type of relationship is that?
I don't think it's a true trust. It's missing something. They say they're treating it as a trust, recognizing it as a trust, because they say they're closing out the trust. But the trouble is they won't say that it is a trust. You know, it's
they have to say that? But they don't have to say it's a trust, do they?
Well, according to corpus, they're saying that it is a trust because they're closing out the trust, but yet they're not saying that it really is a trust. It says it functions as a trust. And then they're saying that they're closing out the trust. So it sounds like a bunch of doublespeak to me. How can it be you say you're closing out a trust if it's not a trust?
But you said it was functioning as a trust.
Yes, but they also say that they're closing out a trust.
Right. So you by the verbiage as a trust means that it's not a trust?
Yes, how can you close out a trust unless a trust exists?
Right. I got that.
Because it says even after his termination of his office, the guardian may reduce to possession, chooses an action standing in his name for the purpose of closing out the trust. So if they're going to close out the trust, and he's got to reduce his choices and actions to some kind of trust res that he can give to the beneficiary because he's closing out the trust. His duty is ending. So anything in his name he's got to put back into the trust. If they're going to close out the trust, they're going to terminate. Well, there has to be a trust to close it out.
Well, it has a res, as some part. Who's the party besides the guardian and?
Well, in this particular purpose, let's say it's the alien property's custodian or his assignees. And since we're still sleeping, then they're the guardians and we're the wards. Even though we're past 21, say, we've been incompetent, and they're running the whole show.
So the guardian is the was that other term you use? The custodian.
Yeah, the alien property custodian and his assignees, whoever that may be.
Okay, but where does it come from? Who gives it to him?
We gave it.
Yeah, we gave it.
Yeah, we gave it all up. What comes to mind for me is, court with, when we gave up our children on the birth certificate, what comes to mind when I hear the word guardian is guardian ad litem. The system has taken over our children because we gave it to them. So what Christian's talking about is all about moving these titles, transferring them back, and claiming our true rightful ownerships under equity. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's what comes to mind for me when I hear the word guardian.
So we give him give the guardian's property. I mean, the guardian property for us, the warrants,
Yes, under all our general deposits that we've made instead of being special deposits because we didn't know it was a trust.
Okay, so then what I hear you saying is this is the way we see the general deposits working in this format.
Yes, because the general deposits are really, debtor creditor, but they're held in trust really.
Right. So then, but back to your statement earlier, so that there is a trust because we just said that they're holding it in trust. Maybe what they said in Juris Corpus Secundum is kind of confusing, but it seems that there's a trust. Would you agree or not?
Well, it would seem like there is because they say they're closing out the trust, but yet they sort of say that they're not treating it as a trust.
Maybe it's because they're not at liberty to disclose, in the private side, because it's out in the open public, but no one's ever bridged over and said, well, I recognise it as a trust in the private, so they're not going to disclose that.
Yeah, so Section 39 said the majority of the ward, where the guardship terminates when the ward attains his majority, or the guardian remains subject to the duty, if it has not been already performed, of making a final accounting and settlement with his ward.
Oh.
So we need to ask for a final accounting and settlement. So that's where the notice of termination or merger and settlement with withdrawal or discharge would come in.
And that fits in also with what equity is, which is on the bookkeeping and not particularly on the accounts.
Yeah, and then look into the section 145, accounting and settlement.
Christian?
Yeah, go ahead, Jacob.
This is Jeff in Washington State. How are you tonight?
Good.
This is all discussed in the appendix to 31 CFR 501, which discusses the War Powers Emergency Act and discusses everything about the alien property custodian.
Right.
And from what you're saying tonight, it seems to me that all those general deposits are being held by that alien property custodian. Perhaps he's the one that we should go to.
What was the stat on that again?
It's the appendix to 31 CFR 501. goes into all the property that has been taken from us because we are enemy combatants, allies to enemies, and we are, in fact, enemies to their United States.
Yeah. So, Title 50A, USC.
Exactly. Everything.
Did you say Title 50?
Yep.
It's 31 CFR 501.
Okay. All right. I know that.
It's the appendix to it.
All right.
I did this about 2 years ago. I went through trying to go through the alien property custodian, but of course that's all debtor-creditor and never worked out.
Yeah, I think it's like that model I gave last night or the Saturday, where the block, and the block was the U.S. Treasury / IRS, and then in that block there's two other blocks. One's general deposit, the other one's special deposit, and then you have a decision maker circle at the bottom, and the agent is presenting you with the offer, and you make the decision that you're giving it back to the U.S. Treasury IRS either as a general deposit or as a special deposit. So it's your decision.
Right, right.
But now it doesn't make any difference how many, or really who has it. We know who has the master record, which is the IRS. And all those accounts, if we want to settle them, they can be all settled by one entity, the accounting agent.
Well, that refers to a question that I have tonight after listening to you for the last 2 weeks. What is your advice for those of us who want to go through the IRS through a presentment that we've received to extinguish the debt and disperse the funds through withdrawing and redepositing for a specific purpose? If we can use that language in an indenture from an IRS presentment, will that impede anything that we're going to do in the next 2 months?
I don't think that would. You can probably handle each particular debt individually in that block or that IMF or IDF, whatever you want to call it. But then I would probably want to handle them all in one fell swoop, though.
Yeah, I've already tried to do it once, and of course the language was the language that we were using in February. Mm-hmm. So I didn't withdraw the general deposits, and it's probably just sitting there waiting for me to do something. So now I have a new presentment, and I figure that I can do something with it.
Well, I think that through the next couple, about 3 weeks, we can come up with some accurate models through corpus juris secundum. And then from there we can develop the verbiage we need to put into these documents.
A lot of times with these IRS presentments, you can take a couple of months to do something or to wait for something. It's not like it's an immediate thing that they need to do. So maybe you're suggesting that maybe I should just hold off until we clarify things?
Yeah, because really we don't have the documents ready. Because mainly we haven't done the research yet. I haven't been moving ahead because I think there's more research that needs to be done. I think corpus juris secundum will lead us to the information we need so that we can move forward.
What avenue of research would you suggest for someone?
Well, I would start where I started, which was under the depositaries for general deposit. which was under bank and banking, under Book 9. Now that was on the 5-8-10 show, NTT and the Nature of Deposits. Just go through Book 9 talking about the deposits, where it talks about general deposits versus special deposits. And then I would pay particular attention to Guardian Ward.
I have access to the 2008 edition, and the section numbers are all out of whack. So what I had to do with the May 8th call is write down the section numbers and titles and some of the key words.
Muted.
Went into the 2008 edition. I found them all.
Okay. Different section numbers, though, right?
Yeah. There's a lot more, but I can do some of that stuff. I like doing that, so I might look into this Guardian and Ward stuff.
Yeah, the Guardian and Ward one I have is $1976.
Those section numbers.
That's going to be our key, really. It's got both the public and the private side in it, and the key is being able to separate the two.
Years ago, I was studying the DC code, and I have in my archive somewhere all the section numbers, but the the DC code appeared to be a kind of controlling statute since it was in DC, and they have a lot of stuff on this Guardian Ward. They use different terms, but it's basically the same idea. There's a lot of stuff in the DC codes about guardians and wards.
Yeah, now if you had trust eyes back then, you probably could have seen it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so I'm going to get into this Guardian Ward stuff and start bringing it onto the call for what I can find.
Well, I think the starting point is the banks and banking, where it talks about the deposits and the nature of deposits and the two kinds of deposits being general and special.
Yeah, I've got photocopies of that already.
Yeah, and everything is a depository today, and we're all going on the assumption that we're all doing banking, because that's what commerce is, banking.
Now, there's a section in that area that's called certificates of deposit. Is that something that could be looked at?
Yeah, it talks about certificates of deposit in there, yes.
Okay, sounds good. Good night.
All right.
Christian?
Is Jace or Eric on tonight?
Christian?
Yes.
Can a certificate deposit be apothecated?
Sure. You can pledge it.
Right. So then maybe that's how part of that puzzle works. If we put it in special deposit, we get a certificate of deposit, then we could assign that to them, or some kind of way it could be apothecated.
Well, it's probably already put in general deposit, so you're going to have to back out of that. You have to withdraw it from that and then redeposit it as a special deposit.
That's what I'm saying. It's special. We deposit it specially, special deposit. Now we get a certificate of deposit, right?
Yeah, unless you're creating something new that doesn't exist in their realm. It's probably been deposited already under general deposit someplace.
So then there'll be two deposits, one general and one special.
No, there can't be two deposits. There's only one. But you have to back out the one before you make the other.
Right. So we back out of the general, go to the private. Now, in the private, we get a certificate of that deposit. Is that correct?
Well, the certificate of deposit could be seen is kind of like the public notice that something privately was done.
Exactly. So now my question is, can that be apothecated?
Yeah, you could pledge it someplace else if you want to. But
right. So
I wouldn't want to take it out of private deposit.
No, you don't have to, because you could do it all back office banking where all those type papers are floating around. Maybe that's how they do it.
Right. Right. As long as I made a deposit, and I could pledge it for interest or trade.
Exactly.
Through a broker.
Right. Private, non-negotiable paper.
I think if we I think we might probably have to take care of this Guardian Ward relationship that's supposedly out there. Ask for that final accounting so we can get a settlement of this account and gain access to the whole thing. Get rid of these wards, or get rid of these guardians.
So we're going to substitute guardian for trustee.
I don't know how do you mean by accept?
No, substitute.
What was the word again?
In other words, before we were saying that we're going to compel the trustee to merge titles. Now we're talking about compelling the guardian to do that. So now, are we substituting for guardian for trustee?
No. Terminating the guardianship.
How's that related to trustee?
Okay, this is Guardian Wards in the Section 39 Corpus Juris Secundum, which is duration and termination of guardianship.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to terminate the guardianship by asking for a final accounting and a settlement.
So in other words, what you're saying is we don't go to the trustee, we go to the guardian to do that.
Yeah, we've got to get rid of the guardian first.
And then we go to the trustee?
Trustee? Who's your trustee?
That's what I'm asking. I'm not clear on that, because we've been talking about trustee in the past. And now we have these guardian guys. So
the guardian, I think, is what you're using as trustee. I think that's what I'm.
Right. That's what I'm asking. We're substituting. It's the same thing. It's a different word.
Right. We're terminating his relationship with us.
Got
it. We being the ward and him being the trustee of the guardian. Say.
Got it. Okay.
He also used another word that's called custodian, which is pretty much equal to the guardian and the trustee also.
Yes, because the guardian is also known as a custodian. So if the alien property is custodian, he's acting as a guardian. He's really the trustee.
So are you saying that prior to you merging the titles or having that executed by the guardian or the custodian or the trustee, that you're going to terminate them? It doesn't make sense. Why would you want to terminate them before you ordered them to execute the extinguishment of the titles or the trust?
That's done all together probably. Because if we're going to get a settlement and close this account out, that's going to terminate the account.
So in other words, if you were going to draft out a document, you would put the termination of guardian towards the end once the extinguishment of the trust has been taken care of. Therefore, the guardian is no longer necessary before terminating.
Yep, I'm thinking like one document that contains parts to every sequence or order that we want to give them.
I like that.
It's like a grant or deed, which you have a addendum clause which identifies the interests, and then you have a granting clause which grants the interests. So it's like a identification of what you want to do, and then the action or the order. An instruction and an order. So an addendum clause and a granting clause.
Kristen?
Yeah, Floyd, how are you?
I'm fine. A little tired, but that's okay. Hey, guardian and ward, isn't that a term in regard to one that's not of age or capability? Isn't that the connotation that those terms carry?
Right. So he could be of age, but he might not be competent.
Right. Well, see, that's what I'm thinking. All of the terminology that you're giving us here is how we're looked at, or how we look at ourselves, or our capability. So when we become capable of handling the account, then we're terminating the guardian, and we're not becoming, and we're not wards any longer. We now are competent beneficiaries.
Right. Correct.
So that's really basically how you terminate the guardian and get rid of the ward situation.
I become competent by knowing that I got to ask for a settlement and an accounting.
Right.
Yeah, it makes sense.
I got to order a termination.
It makes sense that this is correct, because if you go back into the debtor creditor early stages of learning this stuff, what you learn is because of your lack to act upon is deemed as the incompetency, therefore the government deems you incompetent because you've never acted upon.
Right. Your silence got you incompetent. Yep. Because you never knew what to do.
Tammy here.
Yep, go ahead, Tammy.
I have a 35-book set on AMJUR pleadings and practice forms from the 1970s, and I just glanced up, and the main header was Guardian and Ward, and I was like, whoa, okay. So I flipped open to the forms, and the form headings on a bunch of these are really flipping interesting. Form number 244, order restoration to competency and discharge of guardian, committee, or conservator. And they've got all the sample pleadings, captions, prayers in there. Let's see, here's another one. Order restoration to competency and discharge of guardian, committee, or conservator requiring accounting and restoration of property. So I thought, whoa, that's some pretty good stuff in here, man.
Right. Sounds like it.
Good pleading forms. I was like, hee-haw, you know. It's like pages of it.
Tammy, could you speak up? I can barely hear you.
Oh,
please.
I said I've got a 35-volume of American jurisprudence, pleadings, practice, and forms, and I just happened to glance up, and one of the main in these pretty green and red books was Guardian and Ward, and all these sample pleadings to go with this to restore to competency and discharge of guardian, committee, or conservator is one title. Another one is order to restoration to competency and discharge of guardian, committee, or conservator requiring accounting and restoration of property. I like that one. So they're all pretty good sample pleading forms, and these books were from the 70s.
Is that M's for pleadings? Is that what you're saying it is?
Yeah, the whole volume of 35 books I have is American M Jurisprudence, Pleading and Practice Forms, and the other side is AmJur of my office, AmJur Legal Forms. So I got them at William Mitchell College of Law here in Minnesota, and I just bought them because they were pretty. They were green and red, and that was my color theme at the time. But they got some cool stuff in here. I've been using them a lot lately. So I will maybe delve into these some more and put something out there.
Check that out and under the banking there and see if you can find something under special deposit.
I will do that, yes, for sure. But yeah, I'm like, oh, these books are going to come into play after all, other than just being pretty with my decor. I did have one little question, and that's simply this, Christian. I had the light bulb come on after Saturday night, and I probably slept the best in a long time, and I appreciate that. And my question is simply this. Do we need, when we're doing these UCC 1s and or 3s, do we need to get certified copies of them when we're getting them recorded, or just get them recorded?
I would always ask for certified copies back if you had some way of a record then.
Yeah.
Otherwise you wouldn't be able to prove that you filed.
Right. It was only another $6. Yeah. And I did find out something else interesting. The reason the Minnesota UCC won't, they don't have the box online to check for non-UCC filing. It's just not there. So I'm thinking about just leaving that supposed lien there and using that as a tool if I need to go into equity. And if they're griping about having me remove it, well, I'll terminate it upon proof of claim that you're going to settle this matter. So anyway.
Either that or you could put in the collateral block the nomenclature and say that it's a non-UCC filing.
Exactly. Upon a subsequent one, the verbiage on the collateral box is, covers that it wasn't an actual intent of lien, but yeah, I just wanted to share that Guardian and Ward, but I'm going to look for banking and see what they have versus, general versus special. That'll be a good study thing. But it's getting late, now I'm going to check out. And thank you, guys. Thank you, Christian. Like I said, I slept best Saturday night in a long time because the light bulb came on.
All right.
Good night, you guys.
Is Eric on or JC on?
I'll take that as a no.
That's not, yeah.
One of the guys there, what he's done is he's taken a check and someone submitted it into his account. And he's been told by his friend who works in a bank that it will be accounted on the night that it goes in. So he's going to attempt to draw off that, and then he's going to pressure the bank into proving up why he can't draw on it. So I'll let you know how that goes. Because I think he's going to do a withdrawal on it and then do it as a special deposit and issue the extension of credit upon the from the interest. No, just from the placing in.
You might have an account problem because you've got to take and change the whole account from a general account to a special account.
Okay. So he's claiming that first signature from setting the account up as a special deposit. Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
First signature that opened the account. Right.
Yeah.
On the application.
And he's got more leverage then, hasn't he, to pressure on the bank.
Right.
Sweet. He's also
thinking, where is the first signature where I formed this relationship? We got to go back to that first signature that formed a relationship.
Yeah, express the intent on that. Which kind of leads to suggest that expressing the intent is the withdrawal, if you like.
You could say, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just expressing my intent by with the withdrawal, right?
Yeah.
Making the correction.
So then, in a court scenario where we get dragged into court and we're kind of assumed to have given our consent to the action, in the case that we're the defendant, then it's a signature by way of tacit agreement or consent. I'm not sure quite specifically how to verbalize that.
I think we're getting double taken down because, number one, first of all, we didn't make a special deposit under trust. We made a general deposit. And then when we made a general deposit, we had all these debtor-creditor relationships. And then we come into court on a mortgage foreclosure, say, and then we don't know how to do banking. And we get hammered because we don't know how to do banking. And you could have won just under debtor-creditor banking alone. Because you've got to think, when I go to a bank, I hand them a check. They look at the check, and if they don't see the bank's name on there, they ask, do you have an account here? That's the first thing they want to know. Because the bank's name is not on the check, they know it's not one of theirs. So they got to ask whether or not you have an account there. Then if you have an account there, then they want you to endorse it. Then they want to see 2 forms of ID. Now, when we go into court for a mortgage foreclosure, we don't understand they're doing banking. We're doing banking. We're the bank. And they're going to present us with an instrument, a note, for cashing it.
So it's the clearing of the note?
Yeah. They're negotiating the note right then and there.
Yep.
Now, we don't ask them, okay, let's say the note was made out to Countrywide Bank, who was the lender, and let's say Deutsche Bank is presenting it for a foreclosure. So I look at that, and I see that Deutsche Bank doesn't match Countrywide, and I got to ask them, do you have an account here?
Oh, which is almost like a challenging of jurisdiction, is it?
Well, kind of, yeah, but then if they say, well, yeah, we got an account, we're foreclosing on this. Well, okay, well, why don't you endorse it? Put your endorsement on it. Now, if they didn't refuse your offer to pay the tender, that would have been discharged under 3-603, and you would have walked out of there with it discharged. Or if they say, okay, we'll put our signature on there, but now since Deutsche Bank is not the same as the one who the note is made out to, I need to see 2 forms of identification, and the identification I want to see is, I want to see who the owner is. That's the identification you got to prove. Which the identification I want to see is, you got to show me your chain of transfer of titles in order to be able to enforce this instrument, because obviously the holder, but the holder does not prove ownership, although there is a presumption that under a general holding, and that word general again, that your holding is also including ownership until I say otherwise. Well, I just said otherwise, or else I would have waived it. So now I challenge the signature whether or not you are an owner, because I know you're a holder because you got it, but you may be a thief trying to enforce a stolen instrument unless you got a chain of titles that proves you got a connection with the lender who is countrywide. Otherwise, Deutsch, you're a thief. And you just converted an instrument. So UCC 3-203C comes into play that they have to endorse the instrument or else no negotiation can take place.
You can use
and
that
way
same...
I don't fall into a dishonor under 3-504 because the presentment and the dishonor is excused on my part. And I don't care which way it goes down, either way, you won. You got a win-win situation, except we don't know how to do banking. Because we're not treating it as they're doing a presentment of the note. And then when we say, is that your signature? And then they say, well, yeah, that's my signature. Well, or what you're doing is you're refusing to pay it. You're not paying the note. And then you just fell into a dishonor. And now they can go to the secondary contract, the security agreement, and then enforce that and foreclose on you in a court of equity. On the statutory side. And you lost because you didn't know banking. And you could have won if you did know. So it was a win-win situation, you just didn't know about it. Because we're all incompetents.
So we get a charging order from the court, and that is a negotiable instrument.
Yeah, the bank is trying to present an instrument to you.
Then
and
we
now
take
you can
that.
ask the bank to endorse it. Because if they endorse it, I'll pay the instrument. Because 3-203C says there's got to be an endorsement, and I got the right to refuse it if there's not an endorsement. But if I don't say that, then I waive that right. And that way I would fall into a dishonor because I didn't pay the instrument, and then they're going to collect on some kind of secondary contract. Or this one would make that contract valid, probably.
Yeah. I'm seeing this because this is a similar situation where I'm getting a statutory demand, and I'm going to the court for a set-aside application for set-aside, which is almost, well, it is the same as saying prove up on the chain of title, isn't it, really?
Well, if they would endorse it, then after they endorsed it, then I would ask them for their proof of identification, which would give them the ownership rights to present the instrument and collect on the instrument. And if they didn't have that, then I would get them for conversion. Because they would be a thief. They have a stolen instrument because they can't prove ownership.
So someone makes a claim against you, and can you take it back to them for endorsement rather than using the court, or would you do it at the courthouse?
Yeah, but I don't know whether or not you got any teeth there or not. You have to give them notice under UCC 3-505 that there was a dishonor, then have your notary taken give them notice of dishonor. And then you have to bring it in court and probably enforce the dishonor against them. So you're back in court again.
Yeah. Because what I said to the court manager today was the solicitors are trying to encroach on a trust situation. I said that if I just write down the trust reference number on there from the publications that I've done, that stops them encroaching on the trust, doesn't it? And she said, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but all I've said just in the last 10 minutes has been nothing about trust, really. It's all been about banking under commerce, under UCC.
Yeah. Now, yeah, under commerce and UCC, but what it's trying to do is it's trying to open up a negotiation, but actually the thing's held non-negotiable, and it is private relationship, and it's someone's trying to put the nose into a trust. Well, you give them the proof of trust, then they've got no chain of title, so you've cut them off at the pass, in a sense.
Okay, chain of title as to trusts pertaining to I'm not quite seeing how the connection's made there.
Oh, okay. You get a presentment from such and such a solicitor that there's going to be, a hearing whenever. So there's the negotiable instrument arrived at your door. Now you're saying that, you can get them to endorse it, then they need to prove up on the chain of title. But what I'm saying is that at the outset, if the case is already bound in a trust, say I'm doing a dealing with party B. Now I've given notification that trust relation or that relationship is held in trust. It's a special trust. Now the people who are trying to encroach on that relationship, or i.e. collect monies upon, then given notification at the court, according to the court manager, from what I said today, it halts them, it's like an equitable estoppel.
Mm-hmm. So notification of the trust being in place is what's stopping them, not chain of titles then.
Precisely, yeah. And if I didn't have the trust situation set up and given notice of, then I could come in with the chain of title.
Okay, the chain of title in reference to ownership of the trust?
No, in respect to post endorsement.
Because we're like debtor creditor, and we're interjecting trust in here now, and it's got trying to juggle both things at once.
Oh, well, I'm creating the separation by way. The lawyers have come at me with an action, and I'm saying, well, you can't because this is held in trust, and now the courts are saying, yeah, that is correct. You lawyers have to go away because this is a trust relationship, and here's the notification of it that you missed, right?
Right.
Well, take that part of the equation away. Lawyer comes at me with an action for, to collect on monies. I have no trust relationship set up. Now, I do the...
So do the debtor creditor. Do the,
exactly.
Challenge of the chain of titles. Okay, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
So it was kind of interesting when I said to the woman, like, but this is a trust relationship, and she said, well, it stops right there then.
Bingo.
Yeah. So
they dismiss it then?
Well, according to her, yeah, I've got to go in and do an affidavit. But I'm thinking, she's given me a form, which she said, when it goes through and everything, it's now going to cost us, the lawyer, a further £900 to petition the case to continue.
Yeah, maybe I'll put in there like an order or a notice for discharge order or notice of termination or discharge.
Well, this is what I said to her. I said it in the previous case, because they're now coming back at me for collection. I said, in the previous case, I made the judge the trustee, and he's never acted, in his administrative capacity. And I said, he never appointed it. He said he couldn't, but he never appointed anyone else, so I have no written disclaimer. So therefore, as far as I'm concerned, he's still holding the liability, which is in accordance with Article 8 on the Hague Convention on the law applicable to the recognition of trusts.
Yeah, personally, he's the trustee, unless he disclaimed and sent it back. So if he's holding documents, he obviously didn't disclaim. He's holding them. Yeah.
Now in Article 8, I'm pretty sure it's Article 8. It says that
maybe by his accepting trustship, he can't do a reappointment because he knows he is trustee.
I like that one. Yeah, and then he'd have to recuse himself as the judge because he's given up.
He recused himself?
I'm saying then he would have, if he disclaimed his trustee position, then he's taken away his position as judge, hasn't he, really?
Yeah, there might be a conflict of interest. Maybe he should have recused himself.
On appointment or on disclaiming?
Yeah, maybe I'll do an order of termination or discharge, and then when you give it to them, that would be notice of termination or discharge. Because termination would be the public side terminology, and discharge would be the private side. And then don't put a comma between the or.
Okay.
Terminate or discharge. With a comma separator, then that one or the other. But without a comma or separator, that means termination is the same as discharge.
Yeah.
So there's your termination public side or private side wording, and your discharge, your private side wording.
Yeah.
All in order.
Exactly, and it's very strange reading Lewin. When he does miss commas out like that, I was like, this sentence doesn't read right from the English I've been taught. And that explains a lot, Christian. Well said.
Yeah, one little comma can make a difference.
It's almost like termination and discharge are a trust res onto themselves.
Yeah.
There's two sides, the public and the private side.
That's how you control both sides at once.
Mm-hmm.
Now it says in the Hague Convention on Trusts that all trusts must be in written form. Obviously, that's the public side. So when you do get a charging instrument from a court or from a bank or anywhere, there's your trust deposit from them, isn't it, in the public side, which is a general deposit.
Yeah.
Cool. So now that kind of I'm seeing that as that gives you something to work with. And as you've said before, make it non-negotiable and private between the parties. Simple.
Yeah, private stipulation, really. That's what it is.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you'll get them in stipulation by their silence.
I'll tell you what, Christian, you're very, very close to doing some huge work. I know it's already underway in that, but I don't think really we're fully understand. Like you may, but I don't think many of us are understanding the full implications of where this is actually going.
We're about to find out.
I don't think we're the only ones. We've just had a general election here where the Prime Minister, or similar as the President, he's now getting changed and have a coalition government in there.
Mm-hmm.
So there's going to be lots of changes over here. We don't know how it's going to work, but with some of the people in the group there, they're getting confident with this stuff.
Affect the Queenie.
Sorry?
How does it affect the Queenie?
How does it affect the Queen?
Yeah.
Well, they are her administration.
She's executive, or is that how it runs? How it works?
I'm going to have to call back in, Christian, because you're very choppy. Give me 1 second.
Tammy here.
Yeah, Tammy, go ahead.
Oh, I found some information on special deposits as far as pleadings goes, and the title of the pleading was complaint, petition, or declaration to cover special deposits from which designated payments were to be made, failure of bank to pay security agreements on cattle. This particular argument was pertaining to cattle, but it was interesting that it said this, that if the latter deposited said receipts with said defendant bank would make said deposit a special deposit in favor of plaintiff, and that plaintiff would have the exclusive right to withdraw said special deposit. That said debtor agreed with said president of defendant bank that he would make said special deposit, and pursuant thereto said, and they leave these blanks for adding in names, debtor deposited said receipts with defendant bank and received therefore a deposit slip that showed on its face that said special deposit was made in favor of plaintiff exclusively. Said deposit slip is annexed here too and made part of this complaint by reference. So they're, they set it up from the beginning, the way I read it, that it was a special deposit, and they used the deposit slip as annexed to the pleading. So it's quite interesting. Actually, there's a whole thick 4-inch book just on banks, So it gets into special deposits as well. It's pretty cool. So that's all I got. I'll read some more.
Okay.
So we're on track here. I agree. I'm signing out.
I thought she'd gone to bed.
She found something, special deposits under that book sheet.
Yeah, good work here. So you're asking me a question just before I got booted because I couldn't make out what you were saying.
Yeah, I forgot what it was now. Jeez.
How does
about the Queen?
Yeah, how does it affect the Queen, the new administration?
That's right.
Yeah. Well, we're yet to see, but you know the guy who was chatting with you on Saturday?
Okay, I forget his name. Yes, I remember.
Yeah, Ray. He's been chasing the old administration up and down the streets all day long, trying to get his remedy for this nuclear explosion that happened where he lived. And now there's a coalition government. He's been in constant contact with a guy who's been made, I don't know if you have the equivalent in America, but it's the cabinet. It's kind of like, you know, the front seats of Parliament. They're basically the ass kickers, yeah. He's been in constant contact with that guy, and that guy supported him all the way. Now he's in government, and they're going to be chasing up on the old administration for malfeasance, basically. So by doing that, it kind of puts them in a precarious position, because the laws that were governing nuclear installation, there was none covering what actually happens in England, but there are in Europe. Now, Europe gave them a ruling saying that UK were, you know, in non-compliance and therefore liable, which is his whole predicament, like on collection. So they've been done under Article 53. Now, if UK, which is now run by a new administration, are going to be held liable, will this new party who's stood in their stead become the liable party?
Oh, probably so.
Sorry?
Probably so, right? They would take
Yeah,
them
well, sure, I would say so, definitely. And they're not exactly being, you know, anything different from the last lot, who were no different from the lot before, only by name. So they're all running, you know, on the corporate agenda type of thing. So we want to start attacking them a little bit more in their own personal offices, so that we're uncovering the, you know, the sort of veil. We're going to be attacking the people, the office. Because, you know, we're fed up with this shit over here. They've killed all the farming. If the power stations go down, you know, we're pretty much done. And it will only take about 3 days.
Why don't you use that judgment as a special deposit and make them a private stipulation that if they agree to use this locked up forever into deposit and it never gets back out, in return, in exchange for interest drawn against and to be put into an account. So they could privately come at them for a private settlement and closure and lock up this judgment in special deposit so that it can't be seen again on the public side.
Wow.
And that would clear up both sides, and everybody gets to save face and get something out of it.
I like that.
So this would be for Ray, for his particular case.
Right.
Come in at the Court of Chancery, or
put a private settlement on the plate. You'll lock up this judgment in special trust to be held there forever, as long as you get, say, your $70 million or whatever it was, plus interest for whoever, you know, whatever you want to agree to. That way they'll get use of the private asset. They'll be able to do a trade against it. They'll generate the funds, and it'll be kept out of the public, and they won't have to worry about it. So it's like you merge two titles and terminate the whole thing.
Right. So you're giving it to them, and you're not even bringing the courts into it.
Correct. Right.
Wow, what a remedy. Yeah, it is, because it was funny. He sent off the email yesterday, and he got a reply this morning, and it said the litigation on this case is closed, which kind of opens it up to what you've just said.
Mm-hmm.
Well, actually, it completely does. Yeah, I'll relay that information to him. That's fantastic. Because that was one of the biggest things that he sort of seen. He said he's been chasing this down for 13 years. And with chatting with me, which, I've learned everything from you, he was saying he was seeing everything differently. And he wants to give them an out, obviously. And that really does sew everything up. That's amazing.
Allow them to be the vehicle to do the conversion, which they can. But I would give up the special deposit, lock it up forever in special deposit if I get back what I want. And you got a valid judgment for that amount.
Wow. Okay, thanks, Christian.
They could be the vehicle to use for them to do the conversion.
Well, yeah. I don't know if you remember, but HM Treasury have said that they will cover any of the costs of damage, injury or damage, and that's what he's not getting from Shell, is the endorsement on the instrument, so he can claim from Treasury.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're not recognising his evidence, but now the evidence that he had at the time, the people who gave that evidence have moved up to higher status and are now recognised in the public. So the evidence has become substantial where it was sort of questionable, at least in their eyes, before.
Right.
Yeah.
They want to trade the public side for the debt with the private side with the asset. Just do an exchange, which is merging titles. And that would terminate the whole thing.
Yeah, because he said he knows the funds are there,
Well, we're locked up in trade. They can generate the funds. They don't need to even make it look like it's coming out of the public side. It's being generated on the private side. They just need to convert it back over and give you what you want on the public side so you can use it.
Yeah.
Pete?
Yeah?
Are the laws over in your country, basically, they work a little bit the same as how the bankruptcy works here in America?
A little bit. It's an understatement. It's exactly the same. The only thing is that yours are codified and ours are non-codified. Other than that, it's just the same. I mean, this place is a statutory nightmare as well.
Now, are you in Ireland or are you in UK?
England, yeah.
England, okay. I think that, CW, I think you're really onto something, that if we just use the private side as your asset, being your merging titles to the public side, I think that is what we're going to probably come down to.
Yeah.
I mean, it just rings a bell with me.
Well, Well, any other questions?
Only, how do you do it? How do you do it? Phenomenal work, Christian, honestly. It's just...
Well, I just throw it on the table and say, this is the basic game plan. And if they agree to that, they'll tell you how to do it.
Yeah. Because that's what he's been saying when he's been chatting with me and we've been discussing this. He came to the conclusion that they have been telling him how to do it and he hasn't recognised it, you know what I mean?
Right.
He said,
Probably
judges have been telling me to do it, and I haven't recognised it.
Like when I say, well, I can't do that this way, you have to stop and think, okay, then I must be looking at it wrong. The reason why they can't do it is because I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
So like I say, well, if I did this, would that may change anything?
Well, I'm looking forward to talking about this tomorrow night.
Okay.
Good evening. Has anyone heard from JC?
Last couple days ago.
How do you make out in this hearing?
Well, it wasn't a hearing. It was just a submission of documents.
Oh, okay.
It was just a deadline to get something in.
Have time to follow up.
How you doing, Harold?
Busy as ever. Just had a little concern with when you had mentioned earlier about the exhaustion of remedies prior to going to court, as opposed to going to court and then lose first and then use the administrative side.
Uh-huh.
Now, in a lot of the federal practice, they actually, in some of the rules, actually encourage you to do things privately first before coming to the court, to exhaust your administrative remedies before coming into federal court.
Mm-hmm.
So how would that play into the equation that you outlined today?
Well, if you could get a settlement outside going into court, that'd be fine. But, I don't think any of these guys do any kind of settlements outside of court unless they're forced into court first.
But that's what I'm saying is that in some of the federal procedures, you can't even approach the court unless you first attempted to settle on the outside. So what you were saying that you would have to lose first and then come back on the private.
Well, I said, you'd have to complete your administrative side, go and do your records and get it ready. So you could actually go through with it and try to achieve a settlement on the private side then, and then you could certify that nothing happened. Then you could go into federal court.
Right.
And if I lost, then I could come back into equity and get my remedy under equity.
Okay, I just wanted to bring that point out. Because in most state actions, I would agree you could go with the outline that you had went with, but in some of the federal procedures, they actually want you to exhaust administrative remedies before even approaching the court.
Uh-huh. Well, then we'd have to go ahead and certify that we did that.
Question?
Hey, Jacob, go ahead.
About what you guys are talking about, to settle on the private side, you would have to do discovery before going into court versus doing discovery for your case. What would be the difference between the two?
I don't know. Could you get any private discovery out of these people?
Yeah. Actually, sometimes you can get private discovery. Actually, you should be able to get easier than in the court, because sometimes the court rules limit how much discovery you can go after. Whereas on the private side, you can request discovery and put them in self-executing agreements that if they don't reply, you can use it against them. Or as contracts against them.
Yeah, confession
and
and judgment.
Those contracts become records if you have to go into the public.
So you could so would you start then with state violations and work up, so you try to get as many cracks at them as you can for getting, I mean, you basically want to get the mortgage agreement that's got the note listed on it in the pooling and servicing agreement. So your discovery is going to be focused to go after that.
It depends on your plan of action based on your knowledge of the circumstances at the time. In a lot of instances, it's not even necessary to even go after that, because if you see issues, fatal defects that occurred prior to that pooling and servicing agreement, it means nothing. It's null and void. And oftentimes, if you look at these alleged notes, the majority of them, believe it or not, are non-negotiable instruments. So if they are indeed, and especially the arms are clear-cut non-negotiable because they don't have a fixed sum or a fixed amount to pay under UCC 3104, read in conjunction with 3106.
Right.
So therefore, if that's a non-negotiable instrument that they delivered to another, then that whole pooling and servicing agreement means nothing, because it was void at the point of delivery, because it is a non-deliverable note.
Good point.
Are you done, Harold?
Okay, go ahead.
Is there well, first off, they can't. Isn't a 30-year note illegal to begin with?
To a great degree, yes.
Okay, that's number one. Number two,
but you got to know how to prove that.
Okay. How do you prove it?
Like, say, for instance, the non-negotiability of most of these notes.
Mm-hmm.
You can prove that right through UCC. Because most of these notes, even if it's a non-adjustable note, they're filled with conditions in conjunction with the payment that you have to make according to the note. So that's not an unconditional promise to pay or order. You got to pay taxes, insurance or hazard, some other things that they have listed in most of these mortgages. So there's a huge crime going on to a great degree, that they're using non-negotiable instruments as negotiable instruments and securities in violation of their own codes. And this is something it seems like most people miss.
Okay. If you're able to get, okay, well, nonetheless, they're still cutting an agreement, right, Harold? Whether it's void or not.
I didn't catch the question.
Oh, I'm saying whether or not it's a valid or invalid agreement from the get-go or from the entrance of it, just the fact that they've, what's it called, bifurcated?
Okay.
Once you have is that the correct term, bifurcated note?
Well, the bifurcation comes through when they monetize the note and the mortgage or deed of trust. So they're essentially getting paid twice.
Okay.
The mortgage or deed of trust wasn't really intended to be a negotiable instrument. But there's been proof to show that they have been. Got paid to the order of stamp right on the mortgage.
Wow.
Okay. When they enter in,
did they come up with this A2s on the security agreement?
I can't hear you.
They've come up with copies that they proved that they had pay two orders on the security agreement?
Yeah, right on the back of the mortgage. Yeah, so they're actually getting wherever they're accessing the credit is done twice.
So they're taking everything that you sign and using it as a negotiable instrument, trying to get a payment out of your signature.
There you go.
Harold, have you found that what percentage of the PSAs are found in the prospectus? Do you know?
You said TSAs?
Yeah, the pooling and service agreements.
What about them?
What percentage of them are found in the prospectus?
I don't know.
Okay.
But the ones I've seen, they basically read pretty much the same. They're very much similar, just names, numbers a little different, but the outline or the structure of the agreement are pretty much the same.
Okay. Then would you have an insight into what percentage of the mortgage agreements that specify the loan numbers that are attached to the pooling and servicing agreements, what percentage of those would be attached, or what percentage? Because what the biggest problem I've found is that they don't register those. So you can't, right?
No, they don't. They don't register the note, but the only thing that gets registered is basically the trust.
But the loan number that would be able to be found is going to be found in the mortgage agreement, which they don't submit with the prospectus and or the pooling and servicing agreement. Isn't that correct?
I'm not sure. Good question. Say that again.
The mortgage agreement is like the allonge that has all the loan numbers in it, and that is a part of the pooling and service agreement that's normally within with the prospectus, but they often do not register that with it or keep it attached. So even if you identified the trust that your particular loan is in, the hard part is identifying the actual note itself, which is in the mortgage agreement that might not be attached/registered.
Well, there's some of the reasons why they try to obfuscate the truth is because of what they're doing. Well, number one, take for instance, you're in a foreclosure action, and you get to court. You force them to produce a note, and they actually bring in a note. Here lately, they're starting to bring in notes, and I think they're, as one guy said, magnificent forgeries, because they have computer technology now that actually can reproduce your signature with stylus pens. But at any rate, when they come in with these notes, especially the ones that has been allegedly securitized, almost in every case that I've been involved with, they fail to show the true chain of custody of that note from the time it left the originator to the sponsor, from the sponsor to the depositor, from the depositor to the trustee. That is not established. You should at least have 3 stamps on your notes, at the very least. So, by them not doing what they're supposed to be doing in the securitization process, they can't have it in the full and service agreement, at least in specifics, because they didn't do everything that they were supposed to do.
Okay.
They hide all of these assignments, or to get around doing these assignments, to get around the recording fees that they would have to pay, which
not only
added up.
It's not just the recording fees, though, is it?
No, there's other fees involved too.
And tax embezzlement or failure to report capital gains.
Sounds like they turned them into trust res.
Well, actually, they do. The loans become trust property.
Harold, in a typical mortgage-backed securities trust, there are usually at least 3 trustees in the securitization. The trustee on the deed of trust, the trustee on the pooled assets, and the trustee for the owners of certificates of the mortgage-backed securities. Is that accurate?
I think you're on the right track.
Okay.
One
now,
of the 3 I'm not
there's
familiar
also
with.
substitutions of trustees at all levels. So when you're talking about that chain of assignments that's in capiche, not good standing or whatever, have you been able to certify the broken chain of assignments?
Well, it depends on what state you're in. If you're in a non-judicial state, then the onus would be on you to prove that. But in judicial states, you actually have it easier because the onus is on them to prove their case, and you just poke holes in it. Now, if you bring up the fact that this is allegedly in a securitized loan, yet the note before the court only shows one assignment between the alleged lender to the trustee. Your Honor, how could this have happened based on the rules of securitization? There has to be at least 3 stops here. We only see one from first base to home plate. There's no second and third. What's going on here? Then the onus is on the plaintiff to prove his case. Now, if you're in a deed of trust state, now you're going to have to try to gather this information together to present it to a court to show that in the securitization process, they fail to establish proper chain of title, and therefore they're not entitled to enforce anything.
Therefore,
my approach to these cases, whether it be from the trust side or the so-called creditor-debtor side, is to try to find the first fatal defect.
Okay, find the first fatal defect.
The first fatal defect.
Can you give an example or two?
Well, I gave you one about the note itself being non-negotiable.
Okay.
So that means that, and especially if you have an arm, because that argument is very solid on an arm. If you have
and or a 30-year note?
What's that again?
And a 30-year note?
Well, the 30-year note, that argument may fall on deaf ears with a lot of judges.
Okay.
But with regards to the non-negotiability of an adjustable rate mortgage, you got tons of them out there. That's clear.
So would you support a serious consideration of strategy in a non-judicial state to go through bankruptcy court instead, so that you can have the trustee, force him for a proof of claim?
That's an avenue that's gaining more popularity.
Well, in California, a lot of the so-called attorneys, that's, I've been collaborating with a few lately, and that's what that's the only strength they can see as,
yeah, because what you're doing is you're forcing them to prove
exactly
that they're a creditor, that they have a proper claim, and oftentimes if you do it right, they can't do it. Now, I've seen a horrible, horrible decision come out of Wyoming in bankruptcy.
Okay.
And they used a lot of the prevailing arguments that came off of Landmark. But in this particular case, there was Aurora Loan Services allegedly being the holder of a note that they got from Lehman Brothers.
Oh, I've got that right now. Same thing.
Yes, I've seen that scenario quite often because I dealt with a case in Ohio like that also. And the lady comes and testifies, supposed to be the document holder or custodian of the document, and she testifies that she seen the original note, that she handled the original note, but it wasn't in court. And they had some cockamamie excuse that because of the value of the note and everything, they didn't want to chance it to being lost or anything. So they're just bringing her in to testify. And the court went with it.
And they bought her testimony?
They brought her testimony. Now, first of all, I got to go over the case again because I ran through it quickly. I don't know if it was pro se or whether it was attorney on it, but the case had so many gaping holes. Gaping holes. I couldn't believe the decision. So you got to be careful with some of the approaches that you use in bankruptcy and make sure you cover your bases.
How about there's a case that's, I think, kind of I don't know if you heard of the case. I think it was in the Midwest, and the guy went in as a trust for bankruptcy, and he brought in his own trustee for the trust, and then they had two trustees. They had the trust trustee and then the court's trustee. Have you heard of that case?
No, I haven't heard of that case, but actually,
and then
I heard of people firing the court trustee and bringing their own. I never heard of two trustees, but I heard of getting rid of the court trustee and bringing in your own.
Okay.
Because based on the trust principles that Christian has been teaching us, if what's that again?
Go ahead.
No.
Based on Christian principles.
I keep butting heads with you. What you were saying?
I just said based on Christian's principles. I was.
That is there's trust there, and if you take your rightful position in the trust, you can reconfigure what's going on there. I even heard of some people actually ordering the trustee after he signed some kind of negotiable instrument, ordering the trustee to offset the account.
In bankruptcy court?
In bankruptcy court.
Now, the other strategy is that you claim and merge the titles to extinguish the obligation, but you also order the proceeds, which would be triple the amount for them to pay to the bankruptcy court, and you cut a deal on the side with the trustee, and you say, look, you get my mortgage, and I'll give you all the damages. So the judge now decides to get his money out of the deal. He makes him give you the mortgage, and then he takes the, his cut.
Sounds like a win-win for most people.
You like that strategy?
The only thing I don't like about it, is what you're doing is you're adding to the debt.
Okay.
Whenever you pay off with a alleged instrument, you're just piling on more debt. Yes, you might have zeroed out one account, but you created a debt with another account. So it's debt on top of debt. And essentially the only way you're going to extinguish it is go through trust principles.
No, but I mean, okay, so instead of that way of doing it, could it just be the treble damages that you would be awarded instead of a debt?
I don't understand where you're coming from. You're in bankruptcy, and they're alleging that you have a debt that you owed. Now you're talking about treble damages. I don't understand.
Well, if you are working could you not work on the private at the same time that you're working on the bankruptcy?
Private doing what?
Applying trust technology principles.
Okay, so now how are you going to bring that into the public to close out the public side of the account?
Is it possible to get the judge to do it in chambers?
I don't know. Christian? Christian still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Did you hear his question?
Get the judge to do what in private chambers? To do what?
Go into private chambers in bankruptcy court as opposed to federal court.
And get him to do what?
Get him to to explain to him that you've already made the payment, and that there's been a breach of fiduciary duty whereby they owe treble damages, and then tell him that if he declares that, you'll give him 20%, or you'll give him treble damages, or whatever.
Well, that would be you're trying to do a private agreement in chambers then with the other party then.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's doable, but they'll agree to it.
You're bribing him.
Yeah, of course. Why not? You're not really bribing him. I wouldn't want to say that on public radio or whatever you call it. But he's seeing the advantage of being equitable and fair.
Well, in that scenario I was telling you about, where they used the public trustee to use the guy's credit to offset. I think that's what happened in that case. The trustee was promised additional funds, and they got it done.
In the public?
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you very much, Harold and Christian.
Not a problem.
Okay, anybody else got a... After 1 o'clock, so.
I have a quick question for Harold.
Go ahead.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, I was on Dave Mack's call earlier. Did I catch wind that you're going to be either teaching a class or that you came up with some new information that was going to be educated to some folks?
I wouldn't say no new information, but I will be starting, if everything goes well, sort of like a training type scenario, working with people more so beginning and who really don't understand what's going on. They listen to a lot of the shows, people talk, but nobody's actually showing them the mechanics of putting documents together.
Mm-hmm.
And there were several group leaders. Actually, what happened was it was 2 guys, almost within less than a week's time, basically told me that the manner in which I was working is not effective. You have something to offer that people need, especially the people that's working with these administrative processes, and the banks still come regardless because they never had satisfied anything on the public side. And they said that perhaps you should do some webinars where you could show people what they had to do. So being that there was 2 witnesses there, I said, well, perhaps there's something there. So one guy offered me a platform sort of as a kickoff. So that'll be this Sunday, the 23rd, which happens to be my birthday. And,
Happy birthday.
Thank you. And we'll see where it goes from there. This was something that I didn't plan, and we see where it leads to.
Are you able to announce that, Harold? How we can?
Well, I did announce it to a lot of people that I did have emails addressed to it, and Chris, you have it. You might not recognize the email in which it was sent, which is nonguru@begonemortgage.com. So most of the people that I had their email addresses, I had sent it to.
And this is going to be this next coming Sunday?
This Sunday coming up, the 23rd.
And what time zone is it?
Harold?
Yes, sir.
Can you Skype it to me? J.Evik?
What's that again?
J.
J.
Dot. Evik. E-V-E-K.
Are you on right now?
Yes.
I thought I had you.
I can ... you.
You live water, right?
Yes. Yeah, I never show I'm on ever, but
right. Well,
go ahead
to
do it.
Hey, Harold?
Yes, sir.
I would like to have a chance have a private call with you this week. Why don't you give me a jingle-lingle, and I'll give you some information that might just turn your clock on a lot of things. Just give me a call this week sometime during the week.
Okay.
And I'll explain it to you. Certainly right up your ballpark.
Okay. Yeah, cause
I won't be here tomorrow in the morning because I've got notary stuff to do, and then we have our local group until about 1 o'clock, but I'll be here after that. But the rest of the week I should be around here working on papers, so you can get a hold of me almost any time.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? Anybody?
No, thank you, Christian.
All right, so I'm going to say good night.
Good night.
Christian's tired.